On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Tim Bucher. He is CEO and co-founder at Autonomy, and we're going to be talking about his origin story, how he got started. He has immigrant farming family roots, and we'll talk about how an intro to computer science did turn him into a bit of a techie along the way. Worked for some very famous people, leaders in the Valley. We'll talk a little bit about how that helped form his views on a few things, and really talk about what they do at Autonomy, how that's actually impacting the real world. I think there's a lot of applicable lessons that building products that are actually helping people immediately. And Tim, I'm excited. We got so much to cover. I don't know if we'll get it all in there, but we'll try our best.
We'll try.
Okay, I appreciate it. Okay, before we start, can you tell everyone what you guys do at Agtonomy?
Yeah, sure. Well, Amir, it's great to be with you. And
Thank you.
Agtonomy is a company that really focuses on bringing physical AI to robots that aren't usually viewed as robots. Basically, it's equipment that's used in industrial markets, such as tractors in agriculture or tractors in construction or ground maintenance equipment. So everybody, has heard about humanoids and robots there and self-driving cars, but this is off-road application of physical AI to help these industrial markets with the challenges that they have.
Absolutely. Definitely going to dive into some of that, and maybe we'll start off talking about your background a little bit, and I'll let you tell the audience a little bit more. But I am aware that you do have deep family roots within the farming space. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so I'm a sixth generation farmer. My family immigrated over from Europe, so I'm first generation here. And we were dairy farmers, which if anyone who knows about farming knows that dairy farming is one of the toughest farmings you can do. So I was raised in a small town in Northern California where we had a dairy farm, and my older brother took over the farm, which is traditional in the European farming family culture. And so I didn't know what else to do as a kid, knowing I wouldn't get the farm, so I started my own farm. And it was a small 2-acre vineyard because all my friends growing up were very famous grape growers and winemakers in northern Sonoma County here in Northern California. And so I decided to that I really loved that space and started a farm and then went off to University of California at Davis for agriculture and accidentally took a computer course, which really changed my life. And it kind of got me into high tech in addition to staying in agriculture. You know how a lot of times when you find a new passion, you usually give up an old passion. And I didn't do that. I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world because I kept both my agricultural roots going and growing, as well as my keen interest in high tech as well going and growing.
Fantastic. I guess pleasant accidents do happen and they change our roots. And, obviously you've been in the Silicon Valley for a long time. And of note, if somebody does go and look at your LinkedIn, they'll note that you have worked at Microsoft, Apple, and Dell. You've worked for some of the biggest companies out there, and you've also worked for some of the biggest name co-founders and CEOs that ever were. I guess when you kind of look at that intersection of the people that you've worked with, and you look at yourself now as a co-founder and CEO, I guess what are some of your takeaways there?
Yeah, no, great question. I've had the pleasure of working for, I would argue, some of the greatest entrepreneurs in our history. And each one had certain mantras that I really picked up on. So Bill Gates, his mantra, by the way, Microsoft acquired one of my companies, and that's how I got in there. And I worked for Bill Gates. And his mantra was, it's all about software, right? The world operates on software. And he would pound that into me every week. And, he was right. And then I worked for Steve Jobs. I actually worked for Steve Jobs twice. But for Steve, it's all about design. And, he was right too. And then Michael Dell, his mantra was very much around back in those days around it's all about costs. And you know what? He was right too. So what I did was try to assimilate all the good things from these incredible entrepreneurs and maybe leave some of the things that I didn't necessarily think was that good, to the side. But it really helped shape my entrepreneurial focus, my drive, and the things that I think are important for the end customer, which is ultimately what I care the most about, and what they cared the most about too.
Absolutely. I mean, that's those are some of the best people on earth to ever want to learn from. So that could be an episode and story in of itself, a couple of parts series on just that. But when we are talking about what you're doing now, and I guess your career did take you into technology. The farm, and you can please correct me, has the farm been going on? I mean, you're sixth generation, so farming has always been there for you. But going through these other companies you started, working for these famous entrepreneur CEOs, has the farm always been there as well?
Yes. As a matter of fact, all of these incredible entrepreneurs that I worked for, they knew about my farming operation, because I would give them products, whether it was olive oil or wine or any of the end products. I never made a big deal of it. It was kind of like this thing that I never thought would intersect with my high-tech career. But for me, I actually would create all kinds of automation on my farm so that I could be, traveling to Redmond or Seattle every week, or, Round Rock, Texas every week, or, wherever I would be going, right? Silicon Valley all the time. Mainly my career has been in Silicon Valley, but I would always weekly come back to the farm, and I could do a lot remotely. So I had actually automated almost everything on my farm for decades. Like, I was doing this thing called ag tech way before the term ag tech was even a term, but I just didn't know it, right? But I could do it because I had this engineering background that I accidentally fell into, had this passion for farming, and things were going great for decades. And so, my farm operation was going and growing. It was profitable. And then about 7 years ago, I started to see things changing. And by that, I mean, there were a lot of changes in regulations for overtime and other things that were impacting labor. And I also started to see, the labor issues becoming more and more pronounced. What some of your listeners may not know is, in a lot of these industrial markets, the labor force is declining rapidly. And that's just due to the other opportunities that are available, because, kids, younger people, I should say, don't necessarily, want to work in these hot, dirty environments when they have other opportunities. But what I did was I built a prototype, because I had automated everything except for the field work. So I built a prototype with a couple of friends, and it worked better than we expected. And I showed it to my other Silicon Valley friends, and I said, hey, look what, I developed to save Trattori Farms. My farming operation is called Trattori, which means tractor in Italian. And they said, Tim, this is not just for Trattori Farms. This is for the whole world. Like, let's go save the world. And that's how we formed the company. That's how we started the company. And we've been off to the races ever since, trying to help growers all over the world.
That's fantastic. I've noted something with a lot of emerging tech companies, whether it's robotics, whether it's AI, or I guess in this case, even ag tech, we can now talk about it, is people that have functional understanding of the problem area they're trying to solve are seemingly rolling out solutions that are just more easily to adopt. I mean, you worked on a farm. It's in your blood. You've seen it. And I'm a layperson, so I'm not going to pretend I know what the real problems are. But when you see a problem and you go try to automate it, it's an actual value add versus, let's say, I'm going to solve this problem because I think I want to help ag tech as somebody from outside the industry. I have a lot of years of learning to catch up. I guess I'd love your thoughts on that.
Amir, you just hit the nail on the head. This is the most important point about ag tech and solutions that have a high probability of actually working. You really need that ag background first and foremost, or whatever the industry is, right? You need to have really deep roots, deep understanding in that. That's not a guarantee for success, but it makes the probability of the solutions that you do create a much higher probability of success than if you didn't know that industry as well. And so we've always said that's one of the biggest unfair advantages that Agtonomy has versus others, is that we have a very intimate understanding of agriculture and farming and what it takes. And we're solving problems that we have on our own farms. By the way, it's not just me at Agtonomy that has a farm. We have other employees that have farms too. And whenever an ag tech startup comes to me and says, "What advice would you have for me?" I literally say the same thing to them, which is to all of them. I say, "Do you have a farm? Do you have a farmer on your team?" "Oh no, we don't." I said, "Well, go hire a farmer." Right? You have to have a farmer, and a real farmer, not just somebody who has a title of CFO, which is Chief Farming Operator, but somebody who actually is, operating. Maybe make them a part-time employee, whatever. But that is one of the most important things that you just hit on, and I believe that fully in any industry that you go into.
Absolutely. I must admit, my knowledge of farming is limited to watching Clarkson's Farm. So don't laugh. I'm sure that's all,
I watch it too.
It is good humor. I know nothing of the real world challenges, but Jeremy Clarkson makes it look like, he highlights a lot of things, right? Now, if people aren't familiar with the show, it's a show, about a very famous British broadcaster who owns a farm and go through his voyage of learning about it. I guess when we look at that, the couple of things I took away and learned was it is very manual intensive. It is very hard. The operating costs are so high. When you mentioned making an impact. I mean, you did reference people not wanting to get into it because they don't want to get their hands dirty. But from a farmer's perspective, we always hear about it being a challenging financial industry. When you're looking at ag tech, the way you're actually solving it, talk to us a little bit about when it comes to the farmer and returning more to their pocket, reducing their costs, optimizing. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, for your audience, if they don't already know, farming is very thin margins. A lot of times it's negative, or it depends on the crop, the season, how the growing season went, etc. One of the most important things is to provide the grower with an ROI. Like, if you ask me, well, what are you really providing them? Is it a more sustainable approach, a safer approach? All those things are true, but the massive driver is ROI. So if you can upskill current employees that they are able to get to be able to operate multiple vehicles at once, which is what our solution can do. So you can literally operate a whole fleet of tractors, from one smartphone or tablet user experience. And that's where the ROI really comes into play, right? Because you're essentially cloning people. You're not really cloning people, but you're taking the labor that you have in whatever form. If they're just a tractor driver or a laborer or whatever, you can easily learn how to operate Agtonomy software to enable 5, 10, 15, however many vehicles you want to go out there and get the job done, and do it in parallel and do it in such a way that really does bring a lot more money back to the pocket of the grower. Because it's tough out there. As a matter of fact, it's so tough right now because of some tariffs and on top of the labor issues and whatnot that all of us farmers, we call it Farmageddon. It's really a challenging time right now.
I mean, I'd imagine. I can only imagine because I generally, the context, I hear about it and it sounds like it's a very difficult time to operate as a farm. And it seems like it comes in waves and we hear about it in the general public and then it goes away. Then we hear about it. I mean, there is so much of a massive infrastructure. I mean, if anybody has seen these equipments, I don't know the pricing, but they're very expensive equipments. When you think about a farm who's investing in these equipment and they're obviously amortizing the cost of this equipment on their farm, and I am curious about your solution. When you think about the change management, you mentioned one person can operate multiple Agtonomy enabled, OS enabled machines. When it comes to the existing infrastructure and a solution that will bring maximum ROI, is it a case of we need to invent new hardware and come up with the robotics and the machinery to be new? Is it a case of we need to work with what farmers have? I mean, how do we optimize for that?
Yeah, great question. I look at it very differently than our competitors. We do not believe in building vehicles. We do not believe in building hardware. There's a reason for this. Like, there's nobody in the world who would want to build a tractor company more than me. I grew up with tractors. I've been building tractors my whole life. I named my farm after a tractor. But the farmer in me says, wait, that would be really crazy, because for your listeners, these industrial markets, they really depend upon the dealer and the dealer network and the parts and the service, because his equipment is for the livelihood of the business. And there's one other thing that people don't realize. It's the financing. To your point earlier, this equipment is big and sometimes it's really expensive, like $1 million, right? It can be from $50,000 to $1 million. It depends on what segment of agriculture. Well, you don't have cash because we just talked about how thin the margins are. So the wonderful tier one equipment manufacturers, they finance it. They have their own banks, right? It's kind of like Dell Computer has its own financing if you buy computers from them, or other companies similar. And so that infrastructure that is there by these tier one original equipment manufacturers, who've been doing this, by the way, for over 100 years, in these very harsh environments, they know how to build equipment that lasts in these very harsh environments. And so our strategy has been not to build hardware and retrofit kits that go on existing hardware, but to work directly with the manufacturers to incorporate autonomous technology into their factory fit vehicles. So the equipment looks, smells, and tastes kind of like the existing vehicles, but now they have this capability in them where if you don't want to operate it manually, it can operate on its own. And it also brings some additional safety mechanisms to it if you did want to operate it manually, because a lot of people don't realize this, but agriculture is one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. There are lots of deaths every year from tractor rollovers and things of that nature. It's not only is it hard work, as you were saying, it's dangerous work. And so bringing technology into this space, as you know, as we're also doing in construction and other dangerous occupations, is incredibly beneficial for everyone.
Absolutely. And I guess when you're looking at a day in the life of a farmer, they're long days. I'm assuming they have to be long days. There has to be a lot of planning involved. They have to manage fields, what crops go in fields. They have to go test. It's not, there's a lot of, it seems, science involved with the planning and harvesting and management of a farm. When you look at that and you look at the efficiency you're trying to bring about, I guess, and this is a question I like asking a lot of people with efficiency-based product, is where will the farmer be able to spend some of that extra time? Where will they free up some time, and what will be the added value things they can get to that right now they're just behind?
Yeah, a lot of people, and even me, I just said earlier that it's all about the return on investment. And so everybody thinks of that as financial return on investment, and that's true. But there is this quality of life that a lot of people don't realize. Like growing up in a farming family, my family never took a vacation my entire life together, right? We had a dairy farm. Cows didn't, you couldn't just walk away from them. So, we never were able to do that. And yes, long hours are very common. So if you can make yourself more efficient by allowing technology to do some of the work that you had to do previously, you're now freed up to do other tasks to get everything done, more efficiently overall, to then go to your kids', baseball game on a weekend or whatever it might be. And that's really important. There's also just, a lot of people don't realize this, but the stress on farmers is probably one of the highest stress levels of any occupation. There's lots of organizations who help out with that, but it's a real issue. And if you can make the farmer's life better quality overall, you're going to have better products longer term, and you're going to have a more sustainable ecosystem, if you will, of our food supply chain, because you've heard the word food scarcity, I'm sure. And even as a layperson, as you were saying, you probably have heard that term, and that term is going to get louder and louder and louder as each year goes by if we don't incorporate this technology and really help make things more efficient for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think food scarcity, definitely can see how this could be instrumental. And you mentioned something a couple minutes ago about, somebody operating more machinery. We are talking about labor issues in farming. I mean, that's very apparent with what's gone on in the last year, that there are critical areas of labor within farming. And if we're not careful, we could disrupt that foods, supply chain and that scarcity could be exacerbated. When you think about people that want to go into farming, you mentioned young people don't necessarily want to get into the dirt. And I think some of the conversation with AI and has shifted where they're trying to go, hey, maybe I should become a plumber, I should be an electrician, real tangible physical things. What will help attract people into farming? Because it sounds like you're operating and not necessarily sitting behind a tractor, but talk to us about what that is and how that might actually entice people to think of farming as a career.
Let me share a story with you about a couple of our customers. These are all enterprise growers. They're big customers. They have, lots of equipment, and they kept putting ads out for tractor drivers, right? On one farm, they have like 26 openings, another farm, 30 openings, and they just weren't getting any inbound. And so they started working with us, and they realized, hey, wait, you're actually working on a smartphone and a tablet, in an air-conditioned Ford F-150 truck. This is different. This is not a tractor driver. It's like an ag tech operator. And they use that term in the job description. And so they started posting jobs for ag tech operators. And in the requirements, they had video game experience required. The resume flow started, coming in, and it started to attract a younger demographic. So I believe one of the other benefits of bringing technology into these industrial markets is that you're attracting a younger demographic as a labor force that is desperately needed. So if you were to ask me, like, what's the one thing that you're most excited about? And sure, I'm excited about the ROI and making things efficient and saving farmers and all that. But I'm probably most excited about a future for younger folks to get involved in this industry that is rapidly changing. And technology is the thing that I feel is having the most impact, that makes it more enjoyable for them, and overall a healthier ecosystem, as I called it earlier.
Absolutely. I love the mission. I think, the way that company went around understanding how to tap into the persona they wanted without really misleading it, because it does sound like it is a very much gaming oriented system for the operator. So I love the fact that somebody actually took a step back and said, hold on, we actually don't necessarily want a farmer that doesn't know these gaming skills. We have to teach them. It's easier to teach somebody how to learn where to do what versus learning to operate new electronics. So I think that's really interesting.
But having said that, though, Amir, I do want to make it clear that the labor that they do have is upskilled very easily. Another little quick story here is that we always had envisioned it would take 2 weeks to train an existing employee who maybe didn't speak English, or whatever, how to use this. And so we would always have 2 weeks in our initial training sessions, and it literally ended up being 2 hours, right? So within 1 hour, they are operating equipment. And it's a anybody who has a smartphone, which is everybody in the world now, everybody who knows how to use applications, which is everybody in the world now, can pick this up very, very easily. So it's kind of cool to see the upskilling as well as the younger demographic being attracted.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you as a final question, maybe. I mean, you've spent a very well-rounded career in Silicon Valley, doing different roles, work for different managers, as we've talked about, different startups that have been acquired. As you've seen the progress, obviously, you mentioned Bill Gates and his thoughts on software. You've combined software with hardware. You had a hardware background. It is very interesting to me how somehow you've managed you've done the founder thing, so you didn't have to do it. But obviously you're also a farm owner. But to take the intersection of all these multiple things and bring them about into a final, one iteration of another startup, I think it's very interesting, because I don't think a lot of times people can pull all that experience into the next thing. I'm not going to call it seamlessly, because that's not the right term, but to be able to pull it together and leverage all those experiences is not always easy. So I don't know if, and I was going to ask you, I don't know if that was by design. You obviously had a farm. You mentioned somebody said, hey, you have a great product here. You should do it for everyone. But somehow all these experiences have really culminated in putting into a very sweet spot, to be honest with you.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I had no clue in my entire life that I would bring my two worlds together the way they've come together with Agtonomy. But it is really kind of sort of the culmination or the biggest climax of my career in terms of bringing these two things that I love so dearly together. And then on top of that, seeing how big the impact is in these industrial markets, more so than in these high-tech markets. Because you and I, let's face it, we could live without a self-driving car, right? I mean, there's other forms for us to get around. But you and I can't live without food. And so taking the technologies from these other areas, adding the particular needs that we have for these industrial markets, it's just a huge multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. But it's also one that really helps us as a global society to, continue to exist. So for me, this is like the highlight of my career, bringing these two things together that I never thought I would do in my entire life.
Absolutely. Tim, I keep asking questions, and I'm sure you'd have amazing responses for all the listeners, but I know you got to actually get back to it. If somebody does want to learn more, if they do have a follow-up question, what are good ways of connecting?
I think the best way is just to go to our website, agtonomy.com, and from there you can follow us on social and all the other things and keep up with the news and learn more about us.
Okay. Tim, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Amir. Take care.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think Tim took us through a wonderful story, a journey that has brought all his experiences together, and actually is very mission driven. I mean, he did work for some of the greatest entrepreneurs of any time, and took those experiences and has built this company that is impacting farmers and impacting actually the whole food supply chain. And I thought this was a great episode. I'd appreciate it if you could share this with others that also would benefit. Also, like, subscribe, comment, let me know how the show is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.